So, in my games of Arcs, I've noticed that there are about 5 specific court strategies that me and my players use in most of our games. Number 1, basic court play. So, basic court play is pretty simple. This is just the play style in which you simply influence as much as you want whenever you can, and you hope to secure the cards at some point later. This is pretty much where everybody's going to start when they're doing the court. They're not really going to know what cards to influence, or they're just going to have some extra influence actions, for instance, and they're just going to kind of throw some agents down somewhere, and they'll be like, okay, whatever, I'll grab that later. So first of all, if playing basic court play, then one must prioritize placing at least 4 agents on an empty card if you absolutely need it and don't want anybody to steal it from you easily. If the card is not empty, you're aiming for at least 4 more agents on it than a rival. This means that a rival will have to spend multiple turns or multiple action pips plus resources to steal it from you. Now remember, the highest pip amount on either mobilization or administration is 4 pips. So for a player to tie you with 4 agents, they'll need a minimum of 4 pips. For them to beat you, they'll need 4 pips plus resources. So what this means is that if you place at least 4 agents on a card, they're going to have to put in extra effort in order to even tie you on it. Now this extra effort may disincentivize them from competing on the card with you. It may stop them from putting in that effort and focusing their efforts elsewhere. Now, you don't have to do this every time. And this gets into the second part of basic court play. If you want to know when it is necessary to place at least 4 agents on a card versus not 4 agents, then what you need to do is you need to make sure that you are aware of the goals and needs of every player at the table. Because the thing is, if you're influencing cards that don't align with the other's strategies or goals, then you can be reasonably confident that you can commit less than 4 agents to that card, and you can be confident that they won't compete with you on it. Strategy number 2 is the Relic plus Psionic Wombo combo. I feel like this is at this point a pretty well-known strategy meta in the game. I learned this from Snoopy Mate's video. Check out his channel. He makes some really good Arcs videos. So the Relic plus Psionic Wombo combo is simple. This is possible if you hold both a Relic and a Psionic in one of your vaults. If a player leads with an administration or a mobilization card, on your turn, you can spend a Psionic to take an influence action, and then you can spend a Relic to take a secure action in your prelude. You'll need to either influence a card that's empty or a card that you are tied on for this to work. But what you'll see is that this can allow you to get a card in your prelude that you can now use during your turn, and you're able to influence it and secure it without any interference from the other players. And as we get into the advanced strategies on the court, this is what you want to keep in mind. You want to be closing the distance between the time that you influence and the time that you secure. You want that distance to be as short as possible. The longer that you leave agents on a card before securing it, the higher risk you have of someone swooping in, stealing the card from you, and taking your agents captive. So the goal with advanced court play is we want to shorten the distance between the time we influence and the time we secure as much as possible. And the Relic plus Psionic Wombo combo is the shortest distance possible between influencing and securing, because it allows you to do this immediately in your prelude without anybody taking any actions in between. All right, strategy number 3. I've called this strategy the public servant. The reason is that a player who uses this strategy, they are a public servant to the guilds. Now, this method is going to net you multiple guild or vox cards in one political maneuver. In order to play the public servant strategy, you need to be on the lookout for when a player leads mobilization or administration. You want to look for if they're leading with a low card, or if they play a high card, but they declare an ambition. So what you're looking for are these 2 scenarios where you can surpass and you have an aggression card or multiple relics in your hand. When this situation happens, you want to be looking down, and probably you want to be halting your other plans and take this time to play the court. You want to snatch this opportunity the moment it comes up. If you're last in the turn order, this is great. What this means is you can surpass with the mobilization or influence cards that you have. Then you can influence as many cards as you're able to. And then next turn, when you have the initiative, you will lead with an aggression card and immediately secure all the cards that you just influenced. This is obviously trickier if you are not last in turn order. If you're not last in turn order, you are running the risk that you will influence a bunch of cards, and then somebody else will surpass and take the initiative, and you won't be able to lead with an aggression card. If you're not last in turn order, and there's a possibility that someone can surpass you, well, you're gonna have to sit down, you're gonna have to do the math. You're gonna have to think about whether or not seizing is good at this moment. Now, if the court cards in the court are really good, then I think seizing the initiative is definitely a good price to pay in order to secure multiple guild cards in one action. This is obviously context dependent, and you're gonna have to do the math on your own end to see if this is worth it. If this is not, just continue with your normal plans. You'll wait for the next time you can play the public servant strategy when it comes up. Now, the cool thing is you can pull off this maneuver even if you don't have any aggression cards. This is why relics are going to be very important for you. If you have multiple relics, you can still surpass with an admin card or a mobile card. And then on your turn, you can lead whatever you want, and you can just spend your relics to secure as many of the guild cards that you want. Number 4 is a strategy I call Tyrant's Diplomacy, and it's very similar to Public Servant, but with one major twist. Now, this method is going to net you a card, it's going to deny your opponent their card, and it's going to advance the Tyrant ambition, which is the hardest ambition to advance, all in one aggressive maneuver. Okay, so let me remind you for the conditions that you need to be on the lookout for. Be on the lookout for when a player leads a mobilization or an administration card if they lead it low, or if they play a high card but declare an ambition while you can surpass, and you have an aggression card, and if they drop all of their influence on one card. Whenever this happens, you're going to have to halt your other plans and consider whether or not you need to take the opportunity and play the Tyrant right now. Because here's what you can do. If you're last in turn order, once again, this is great. You can surpass, you will then be able to take the initiative, you'll then be able to influence this one card with all of your action pips and psionics if you need them, until you are now winning the card by one agent. Now that you have the initiative, you will be able to lead the next turn with an aggression card, or you can use a relic and immediately secure this card. This will net you that card plus all of those captives all in one fell swoop. Now, once again, if you're not last in turn order and there's a possibility someone can surpass you, all right, it's time to do math. If that court card specifically is really good, and if at this point in the game denying your opponent is really good, then again, I think seizing the initiative is a good price for gaining a card and advancing Tyrant and halting your opponent all in one go. All right, the next strategy is what I call Warlord's Diplomacy. Now, Warlord's Diplomacy is potentially my favorite court strategy in the game, and it's really fun. Now, this method is going to allow you to secure cards while also competing in the Warlord ambition at the same time. Now, fair warning, this method is riskier, and it will require you to provoke a lot of outrage. But if you play it right, you can control the court and the battlefield in one giant coup. As a reminder for the rules, when you destroy a rival city, you provoke outrage of that resource type. But you also ransack the court. Ransacking the court lets you secure any card that has any of the rival's agents on them. Then you will kill all agents on the card and take them as trophies. When destroying a rival city, this move will let you steal a card that you cannot out-influence, either due to lack of cards or due to lack of resources. This move will also allow you to swing Warlord in your favor if there were a lot of agents on that card. Warlord's Diplomacy, to me, is really fun. It's the thing you use when somebody feels 100% confident and cocky that the 4 or 5 agents they've put on a card is going to guarantee them that card. What they've done is they've forgotten that you can just steal the card by force. So if you find yourself in a scenario where you can't play the Public Servant or you can't play Tyrant's Diplomacy, it's time to start looking at war. All right, so those are the 5 basic strategies for good court play that I've noticed in our games. And the follow-up question for me is naturally, all right, so I'm now employing these strategies and I'm getting as many court cards as I hopefully want, but how do I stop other people from playing the same strategies against me? That is a great question. So let's talk about that. All right, number 1, when able, you want to avoid declaring ambitions with the mobilization or administration cards that are numbered 4 through 6. Now, the reason you want to do this is whenever you declare an ambition with the mobilization or administration cards numbered 4 through 6, you are opening up the opportunity for someone to surpass you with the 2, out-influence you, or play the Public Servant, and then they will, play an aggression card next turn, and they'll secure all those cards from you. Avoiding declaring ambitions with these cards when you can will hinder people from playing the Public Servant or Tyrant's Diplomacy strategies against you. The goal here is you're not going to completely stop Public Servant or Tyrant's Diplomacy all the time, but you do want to hinder it from happening easily, and you want to make people spend more effort and more resources in order to pull these strategies off. All right, number 2, avoid placing 1 to 2 agents on a card unless you are 100% certain that you cannot be surpassed and outmaneuvered on that card. All right, so this is the update basically to the point I made in the beginner strategy guide video, because I used to say, place at least 2 agents on a card and people probably aren't going to out-influence on you. But actually that's not true, because if you're looking out for the Tyrant's Diplomacy or Public Servant strategy, people are definitely going to be saving their cards and outbidding you with those 2 agents pretty easily. So what you want to do here is you always want to avoid just placing 1 to 2 agents on a card. Maybe even avoid placing 2 to 3 agents on a card, all right? Because the goal here is you want to stop people from being able to use Tyrant's diplomacy on you. There are obviously scenarios where you've counted cards or you've looked at people's board states and you realize that, all right, well, if I place 2 agents on this card right now, or if I place 1 agent on this card right now, I know just based on the way the table is going that nobody is actually going to out-influence me on this, and I will be able to secure it, you know, in 1 to 2 cards, whatever. And obviously, when you're in those scenarios, that's great, all right? You really want to be looking out for those scenarios when you can. But on the whole, I think my rule of thumb here is influencing 1 card 4 times is better than influencing 4 cards 1 time, unless you have a 100% guarantee of being able to secure those cards without interference. Remember, this is the thing we're playing. We're wanting to look at everybody's board state and realize, can I take this with a 100% guarantee without somebody interfering it? And that's why we want to avoid placing just 1 to 2 agents in most cases, because when you're just placing 1 to 2 agents, you are opening yourself up for somebody to be able to out-influence you, take the card, and take the captives. You might just have to wait for a better opportunity when you can place more influence on those cards. Number 3, if you enter into a court battle with a player, make sure you resolve it before someone uses Warlord's diplomacy against you. So once 2 players start duking it out for a card and there's now 8 or 9 agents on a card, those are usually the times where an alarm bell is ringing in my head and I think, all right, I need to go destroy one of those players' cities and take all those captives as trophies and swing Warlord in my favor. The moment more than 4 or 5 agents get on a card, those look real juicy targets for Warlord's diplomacy, okay? So the moment you have, you're participating in one of those court battles, you need to be defending your cities, or you need to be making sure that you win that card fast before one of those battle-heavy players comes, destroys your city, takes that card, and takes most of your agent supply. Alternatively, if you are in a court battle and you just can't quite out-influence somebody, they keep tying you or they keep beating you, all right, well, now is the time where you stop looking for regular diplomacy avenues and now you start looking for a chance to use Warlord's diplomacy against your rival. If they're going for broke on this card with all their influencing and you have the ability to move into their city and destroy their city and take the card and their captives as trophies, this is the time where you start wanting to use that. So to sum up basically all these counter strategies, here's basically the general rule for playing the court well. Don't take risks in the court. Only compete for cards when you have a guarantee of taking it. Only play for cards when one of the 4 advanced strategies comes up. Only influence cards when you can do the Relic psionic wombo combo. Only influence cards when you know you're about to play Tyrant's diplomacy. Only influence cards when you know you're about to play Public Servant, or just use Warlord's diplomacy instead. In my opinion, if you have a choice between the risky basic court play or just waiting for a better opportunity, you should just wait for a better opportunity. Work on things other than the court for now and wait for the opportunities when the situation arises where you can play one of those 4 advanced strategies. Now, I know a lot of people will say that the conditions for completing some of those strategies are too niche and they won't happen all the time, but I guarantee you, if you're saving your cards for the right time, those scenarios where you can play Public Servant or Tyrant's diplomacy come up way more often than you would think. Don't take risks in the court. The moment you take a risk, somebody will outmaneuver you, they're going to take your cards from you, and they're going to take your agents from you. All right, so let's move on to some miscellaneous tips. Now that you know of the 5 core strategies and now you know of the ways you can counterplay those strategies, let's talk about what you should be generally doing in your gameplay if you want a court-centric game. Okay, number 1, in case you haven't already figured this out, relics and psionics should be your focus as far as resources go in this game. The reason is that relics and psionics allow you to boost the actions on your played administration or mobilization cards. They allow you to boost your actions with your aggression cards, or they will just allow you to influence and or secure if you do not draw the right cards. Number 2, you want to save your low-numbered mobilization or administration cards for the opportunities to play Public Servant or the Tyrant's diplomacy strategy. So while it is common practice to save your high-numbered cards for surpassing later in the round, in this case, when you actually get the low-numbered mobilization or administration cards, I'm thinking the 1s and 2s, maybe the 3s in certain scenarios, you actually maybe want to save those cards, because those cards are what's going to allow you to capitalize on the moments when somebody leads with a high-numbered mobilization or administration card, and those are the scenarios in which you will play Public Servant or Tyrant's diplomacy. Number 3, now if relics and psionics are going to be our focus for this game, what that means is the map layout in our game is going to be very important. So if you actually look at the ARC's board, you'll notice that relics and psionics are only in 4 clusters on the map. Clusters 1 and clusters 3 have no relic or psionic planets. Clusters 2 and 5 each contain both a relic and a psionic planet. close together. Cluster 5 has these literally right next to each other, and Cluster 2 has these one system apart. Cluster 6 has one psionic planet, and of note, it is also semi-close to Cluster 5's Relic and Psionic planet duo. And then finally, Cluster 4 has one Relic planet. Now, this planet is much more isolated, but it has 2 city slots, so that's something going for it. What this means is that any setup cards that close off both clusters 2 and 5 are bad if you want a court-focused game. Now, if there's a setup card that only closes one of these 2 clusters off, you need to make sure you either start in the one that's not closed, or you have easy access to the one that's not closed. So the moment that the setup cards come out, you need to be looking at the setup card, which clusters are closed off, and you also need to be looking at, in turn order, your specific starting locations. Are you starting with a city in one of those Relic or Psionic places? Or are you starting in a place that you can easily access one of those Relic or Psionic places? These are the times at the beginning of the game where you need to start looking, okay, maybe I can play a court-focused game. If both of these clusters are closed off, or if you do not have easy access to one of the Relic or Psionic clusters, you may need to think about not playing as much of a court-focused game as you want. Or maybe you will go for a court-focused game, but you maybe have to fight and get aggressive first and take those planets from somebody else. So if the strategy is to take a lot of Relics and Psionics, the natural question I think you would be asking me right now is, okay, Ethan, should I be declaring the Keeper and Empath ambitions? I will be having a lot of Relics and Psionics after all, so clearly this is a shoo-in for the ambitions I should be declaring, right? Well, no. Maybe not completely no, but you shouldn't be declaring them regularly. So the reason I say this is that you're taking the Relics and Psionics because you want to be spending those resources for their actions. You don't necessarily want to be hoarding them. If you're securing a lot of cards, the cool thing is you will be able to compete on pretty much all of the resource ambitions already. Now, the exception is if you find yourself in a position to declare Keeper or Empath, and you 100% know that you will not need your resources until next chapter, hey, that's great. Now you can declare Keeper or Empath, and you can hoard your Relics and Psionics if you want. But I would argue that you should not do that until you are sure that you do not need the resources this round. Also, as I've already mentioned, if you have just a lot of the Relic or Psionic guild cards, then you could probably still declare Keeper or Empath, because you could be reasonably certain that you can definitely compete for those even if you're spending the resources. And that's all that I got for you today for playing the court well in the base game of Arcs. I hope that these tips are going to be useful for you. I know they've been useful for me, and I know that they've really transformed my court play in base game Arcs. We will be working on a separate court video for campaign arcs because me and my friends believe that the court is different enough in the campaign that it definitely warrants its own video. There's some extra things going on there that we think requires their own tips and tricks. But until then, everybody, be on the lookout for new arcs videos, be on the lookout for a new Six Siege gameplay video coming out soon. All of that is in the works. And until next time, see ya.